Andy Penn, happy International Men's Day for tomorrow. This generation of men want to play a greater part in the raising of their children. However, parental leave and flexible work are still options largely reserved for women. Research shows that men are twice as likely to have their request to work flexibly rejected, and that men who choose to work flexibly are less likely to be promoted than women who work flexibly. At Telstra, what are the rates of men and women taking up flexible work and primary parental leave? Have you set targets for men to take up these options? And what are you doing to ensure that men who work flexibly are just as likely to be promoted?
Andy Penn.
Well, thanks very much, Walter. And it's a great point. And we have actually, I'm trying to think when we did it, it was a couple of years ago now, introduced parental leave, paid parental leave for dads as well. And so...
and how long is that?
16 weeks.
Right.
So, and we've had... And we've had a good number of men in our organisation that have taken it. And again, I think... I don't want to keep going back to the hybrid working, but I think the point about flexibility enables a family to be able to work together to work out what is the best way that they can sort of organise themselves together.
Walter's asking too about the comparative rates. I don't know if you have those off the top of your head, but compared to women, are men taking up that leave?
Yes, they are, but I mean, overwhelmingly, it's more women that take up that leave. But it's there and it's available. We've got lots of examples where men are taking advantage of it.
Yeah, Emma?
I mean, I think one of the reasons we know that even when there are policies in place that there isn't actually as much uptake from men is because the social norms that, guide our society haven't yet caught up in a way to those policies. So I think some of the work we need to do is to work on changing social norms to encourage and create that environment where men feel like they can play that equal caregiving role. And then there's other policies that also need to support that, including things like free, publicly funded early childhood education, which Australia really doesn't have at the moment. And so these gendered issues, it's not just about sort of creating one policy, unfortunately, that's going to change things, but we need multiple efforts that are going to address that. The gender pay gap, the superannuation gap as well, play into that.
And Emma, you touched on it earlier. I do want to come back to it, how the pandemic has differed for men and women, and particularly with work from home, which we've been talking about tonight. Has it been a different experience for blokes and for women?
Well, we know that it fundamentally has. Unfortunately, the vast majority of people who have taken up that kind of unpaid caregiving role at homeschooling is women. I think there was a McKinsey study that showed that women with young children, I think, were 23% reported that they were considering resigning or downsizing their careers, compared to only 16% of men. So women are doing that. Also, we know that the industries that were most affected by COVID, whether that was our frontline workers who were kind of putting their own safety at risk to take care of us, vast majority of women-led sectors, the ones that women were much less likely to get JobKeeper, they were first to lose JobKeeper. They've been the first to kind of have their industries affected by redundancies. If you think about the insecure and casualised workforce, so it's been. I mean, people think that actually potentially the COVID impact has set back gender equality decades, and unfortunately, the policies have not really taken that into account.
Eliza, what about your experience when it comes to sharing the parenting duties during the pandemic? Has that been what's happened, or has it been a bit different for you?
It's been completely different for me. Yeah, so what you was just saying, Andy, so my partner got 3 months paid leave. So when I was just gave birth last year, so we had a newborn at the time, and so he got those 3 months paid leave. And then we were able to suddenly both merge into working from home. I worked on a book that's coming out next year on parenting with disability called We've Got This. He was able to, work in the office, and the office was just in the studio. And so then we were homeschooling, and my 6-year-old daughter would, say to my partner, Carl, hope the traffic's okay. And he would walk a couple of steps and go into the office. And then he would come inside and we could have lunch together, and then I would have a break, and then he would have a break, and we could take the parenting load, and I would do some homeschooling and he would do some homeschooling. So for me, it was the opposite. But I have heard from many people that that is not the case, and that unfortunately we've still got so far to go, because some men do just get to work in the office and shut the door, and the women take the load.
Yeah.
I mean, I've got 3 young children. Great, I'm a single parent. I have a great, their dad is an amazing co-parent, and we split time week on, week off. And so when I have them, it's 3 of them at home trying to run a business and homeschooling. It was literally impossible, and I just think the burden on sole parents in particular, I just can't express how challenging it was. And
I can imagine. George, let me ask you, I do like to ask you big picture questions. As the pandemic, this has been often noted, shone a bit of a light on existing inequalities, whether it's gender inequality, and we've had a lot of focus on that, particularly earlier in the year, racial inequalities. Is this something that's, again, coming to the fore when we talk about these issues about the workplace now as well?
Yeah, look, I want to frame, it's a good question, and I want to frame this by thinking about what is the thing that the society spat out that you didn't expect, but once it happened, you thought it was always coming, that COVID. I'm asking you all to put your thinking caps on and think about which social movement exploded this year. Now, we obviously took a cue from the US last year with Black Lives Matter, and that didn't seem to take off. There was another cue from the US, which was a sort of anti-vaxxer, Viking raid on the Capitol. That doesn't seem to be taking off.
Is that what we're seeing a bit of in Victoria,
there's
in Melbourne?
There's a bit of performance at the margin, but I don't think it's taking off. But something did really blow earlier this year, and that was from the moment Grace Tame was
named Australian of the Year.
Australian of the Year, and then Brittany Higgins brought her story forward. It's almost as if that was the collective moment where women of Australia said, right, we've had it with you guys. And I think that was the pressure cooker of COVID last year. And there are a couple of structural issues that were there from the start, but COVID's done something else. So COVID is the first, so the health part of the lockdown, which brought on a recession, is the first one since the early 60s where the majority of jobs laid off belong to women. So we're still 160,000 jobs short of where we were, I mentioned earlier, where we were in February of last year. 2/3 of those jobs belong to women. Recessions in the mid-70s, the early 80s and the early 90s, 8 out of 10 of the jobs that went in those recessions belonged to men. Blue-collar workers in manufacturing, construction, mining and the like. This time around, it's women in the performance in the arts, in education, because we've obviously, for some reason, the federal government want to do a drive-by on higher education, which they pulled off. There was also a bit of burnout in health, a bit of difficulty in teaching, and a couple of other sectors too: hospitality, restaurants, cafes. So when you impose a burden like that on 2/3 of the workforce, and then you expect them to do the homeschooling at the same time,
it's going to be a problem.
Young kids or kids approaching year 12, first year uni and stuff, something had to click.
Jane,
something had to snap, and it did.
Do you agree, Jane, with what George is saying there?
Absolutely, and I think we just need to be clear that women are sick of it, and there's not a woman sick of it. And there's not a woman I know who hasn't got a story, and they'll share that story with you if you ask them. I've got stories, everyone I know has got a story. And let me tell you that the thing that we know, particularly with lockdowns, is that some of the things, and this is why I think Grace Tame absolutely hit a nerve with people, what's been exacerbated, it's been things like domestic violence. And so being able to say, we're over this, we need to do this differently. The comment was made earlier about social norms. That is so true. We need to say, unambiguously, it's not okay. And it's not okay unless someone says it's okay. So that's why I think George is absolutely right. This has struck a chord, And it doesn't matter whether you're talking older women, women in their 70s, women in their 80s, they're all talking about it. And let's hope that that galvanises change. We've seen some changes in legislation coming, which I think is fantastic in relation to consent, but I think we need much more than that. And to go to the earlier conversation, David, if you look at societies that are more equal than here, if you look at some of the Scandinavian countries where men actually get equal access to maternity and paternity leave, where men take an equal share in the raising of those children, not only do they have a great relationship with their kids, but the women can get on with their lives and their work as well. So let's hope we can take steps in that direction.
All right, I've got to get to our... Just very quickly, Emma.
No, I wanted to agree, but I think this issue about exacerbating inequalities is a huge issue that has really played out with COVID. And I do think that the movement, I think it actually builds off, I do think it is building off the Me Too movement, which was calling out sexual harassment. We know Australia, 1 in 3 Australian workers experiences sexual harassment in the workplace. It's worse for First Nations people, women with disabilities, gender diverse people, and that has, I think, plays into this idea of the Great Resignation, which is around toxic workplace cultures, which is a topic we haven't yet kind of delved into yet.